Right, everybody. Good evening and welcome to another live stream. I hope this one finds you well. And as you join in your numbers, can I just usual kind of reminder of what needs to happen. If you like what we're saying, let us know. If you got questions or comments, send them. We'll pick them up on the comment stream. And if you're on Periscope, send as many hearts as you can. If you really like it, super hearts. Share it as widely as possible, and basically let's get the conversation going. And tonight I'm really pleased to see your comments coming in. Hi, Ellen Joan. I'm really pleased to be joined by my good colleague and friend Ed, who is not just a co-founder of Alt News Media, but also chairman. Or is that chair, which is politically correct?
Chairperson, I know. David, chairperson.
I'll stick with.
Stop assuming my gender.
I know. Thanks. See, this is why we work so well. So yeah, for Britain as well. So you've got the two of us for the next hour, and we're going to actually have another person join us. One of our great supporters here, Jed. And actually, just a shout out to all of you. If anyone would like to come on the live stream and have a chat with us. That is possible. So just to let you know that. So as I say, that's really what this is how we're developing this as we go along with live stream. But I see all your good evenings, and yes, I appreciate all of you folks being here with us. Good numbers. So I think Ed, I'm not sure what we're going to talk about tonight.
There's not much happening, is there, in the news? No.
Maybe we should just stop this now, shall we? So okay, listen. Can I let me kick off because hi Angela. I've got stuff I need to get off my chest to start with. And here's my fundamental issue to do with all this rolling over of statues, this cultural vandalism, this defacing of the things that made Britain great. I've had enough of it. I'm sick of it. I reject it. I feel that, the only thing worse than the protesters is our supine government who won't stand up to them and won't defend our values, our heritage, our culture. And I'm sorry that we're ending at a point which seems to me, Ed, very dangerous. I'm not sure where this thing is going to go at all, but it's not good. What's your take?
Well, I totally agree. I mean, I don't think there's an end, is there? If it carries on, then there is no end because you can't satiate the beast. And at the moment, it is a beast that isn't based on anything rational. It's now just a kind of combination of mob rule and anger and emotion and actually opportunism. So I think what we're seeing is a lot of opportunism from the extreme left, the sort of momentum types, shall we say, that see, actually, here's an opportunity for us to exploit something and get at Boris, get at the government, get at the UK, get all the people that they hate and frustrated by. And so what we're seeing is really people that can't win by the ballot box exacting some sort of revenge. And it's a pettiness. They're jumping up and down on a toppled statue. The vast majority of people won't have a clue about the history of that guy. They're just seeing it as the sticking one up over on the rest of us. So where will it end then? Well, when there's no more statues, then what's going to be next? It'll be books, it'll be films, it'll be people that have benefited from the money from those people. And then ultimately it will be people. So in a couple of years, if you own a copy of Gone with the Wind, you will be subject to being prosecuted. That's what will happen. I mean, we laugh, but it's a thin end of the wedge, which is why Boris has to really step in, or Priti Patel, and step in now and just say, this stops now, immediately. There'll be no more defacing of monuments or statues, put a fixed penalty in place, 10 years, whatever it is, to stop it in its tracks. And yeah, we can have public debate, we can have democracy, we can discuss these things. But this, a load of students sign a petition and the thing's pulled down or renamed within 24 hours is not how we do things in Great Britain. And it's got to be stopped, and stopped quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I see this as this is basically mob rule. We saw the scenes in London around Parliament with the Churchill plinth being defaced, as the police pretty much just stood by and watched. We saw probably even worse than that, Ed, the cenotaph, the possibly one of the most sacred places that we have. People trying to set fire to the Union flag on the actual cenotaph itself. We saw that. And, you know, I'm sorry, I cannot recall in a long time since I've witnessed stuff like that, Ed, that's filled me, and I'm suspecting millions like me, like you, like the people on this stream, with a combination of horror and anger. I mean, how did you feel when you saw those sights?
I think a number of emotions. Obviously, like most people, extremely angry, I think is an understatement. But also a bit of a feeling of helplessness, because what we saw actually were a police force completely disinterested in upholding the law. I mean, at the end of the day, there's criminal damage happening in front of their eyes, and we see the people that we hope will uphold the law actually deciding to pick a side, you know, from taking a knee through to people standing in the way of these people, protecting these monuments, being moved on, and then the police standing back as that vandalism takes place. So I think that feeling of, it kind of makes you feel sick, actually, doesn't it? I think it's a kind of desperation and sickness to the stomach of, wow, you know, this is serious. This is happening under a Tory government, and they are doing nothing to stop it. And we have a police force that are almost egging it on. And I think, you know, I just watched a piece on my local news, on the local news whilst I was eating, and unfortunately it was BBC local news that was on. And you know, you had this church where a grave had been graffitied. It was a listed tomb, actually. It's an old listed tomb, and it had been graffitied and damaged. And the vicar came on and said, I'm actually not going to get this cleaned off. I'm going to let it stay as a reminder to our evil past, and I wouldn't be sorry to see this tomb go. Now, I'm sorry, I have no idea who this person was, but whoever found out the history of this guy who'd been buried here is what I call a serious offence archaeologist, because they must have done some real research to be offended by this guy. But I think that's symptomatic of the issue. We're just going to accept criminal behaviour. You don't go and graffiti things. You don't. You know, this is Britain. We don't allow this stuff to happen, and yet there's this collective will to allow it to happen and almost condone it and egg it on. And of course, the message that's sending by the police, by this vicar, by everybody else is, wow, this really works. So what next? Let's go around the country and start destroying things. And it's mob rule, which is why I go back to what I said 5 minutes ago. Boris, Priti Patel have got to come down hard on this. You know, we voted them in. We gave them an 80-seat majority as a law and order party. And yeah, I mean, Boris did say I'm the most liberal ever Tory leader, and I think he's living up to that, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I mean, there's a couple of things I would add to that. I mean, when I saw the sights, and as you say, Ed, it would be an understatement to say we feel sick. It's worse than that. There is a sense of helplessness. There's also a sense of everyone saw what was coming. This was not a surprise, because we know how these thugs, and that's what they are, thugs, operate. We know all of that, and yet the police, who are an armed, I mean, let's be fair to our police. They are an unarmed police force. They were going to be facing something which was going to be violent. And what arrangements were put in place by Cressida Dick and indeed Priti Patel? None. The arrangement that was to put in place seems to be retreat as fast as you can. And I felt humiliated when I saw police officers running, you know, parallel to Parliament there, with the mob absolutely bloody chasing them. We should have here's what I think. We should have had the SAS in. We should have had the British Army in there to teach the mob that the rule of law is applicable to everyone, and that includes them. And one lesson I've learned over all the decades is this, Ed. You know, the more you appease the crocodile, the hungrier the crocodile becomes. And 100%. Right now, that crocodile is absolutely ravenous. And what sickens me is it's absolutely it wants to consume everything that makes Britain,
Yeah.
great.
And I think what so there's deliberate conflation of issues going on here, and it is deliberate. So people aren't saying we think these slavers were upstanding human beings. Of course not. History is history, and it's good, it's bad, and it's ugly. But at the end of the day, it is British history, and some of it is horrendous, and nobody is making that argument. What we're saying is this needs proper debate and discussion. And if at the end of the day, the vast majority of the majority of the public want to start changing street names or whatever, then that should and can happen. What we can't have is subjective opinion of people pretending to take offense, because I'm sorry, 300 years ago, what was happening does not impact anyone's life today. Nobody is a slave, and that's reality. And so anybody who is offended is choosing to feign that offense or take that offense. I'm sorry, we nuked Japan less than a century ago, and the Japanese aren't demanding any war films removed from the television. This is
good point. Good point.
What's next? Any victims of crime, we won't have crime dramas on the TV because they'll be offended. No, of course not. It's madness. It's absolute madness. So, these people are part of our history. And of course, we've evolved. And what happened in the slave trade was appalling. And that history must and should be told. But equally, these are important historical figures. They built docks. They built cities. And you cannot erase them from history. ISIS do stuff like that. Fanatical groups in the Middle East do things like that. This isn't Tehran. This isn't Baghdad. This is Britain, and I despair. I absolutely despair.
On the topic of the slave trade, I just wanted to say a few things on that. Actually, the thing about the slave trade that we never hear from the rabble is that whilst Britain, like just about every other or many other countries in the world, engaged in slavery, we also ended slavery, the transatlantic slave trade. Of course, not the Middle East, the Arab slave trade, because that carried on a much more vicious slave trade. But let's not talk about that. Let's not talk about the slave trade that we have in the UK right now today, where, Eastern European girls are being sold. Young white British girls also in certain communities are being traded around as if they were slaves. So that, so I object to, from a 2020 perspective, we can all agree that, slavery is not something that we would stand over. But you can't judge what people done 200 or 300 years ago, because that was in the context of the time.
It's easy to look through the lens of today. The past.
Exactly. So I think, I feel like, and you made a great point there, a lot of these guys that are being demonized also help put up our great cities. They made incredible contributions to that which many people enjoy. And in fact, Liverpool, let's be clear on it, Liverpool is a city which has a debt to some of these individuals, but did they not help put Liverpool on the map and contribute to the city and in other, Bristol and other places as well?
Yeah, so, of course. Liverpool was the wealthiest port at the turn of the 20th century. 90% of the slave trade actually came through Liverpool and built great wealth. It actually had its own armada at one point. But it's history. And as I said before, not all history, there's good and there's bad in history, but it's history and it's our history. Now, what I find very interesting is people seem to only be offended by British history. So, people aren't calling for Karl Marx's statues to come down, for example, or, individuals that aren't it only seems to be the British history that offends. And that in itself, for me, speaks that these aren't people, they're not good actors. They're not acting in good faith. What they're saying isn't actually based on reality. As you said before, modern slavery gone up fivefold in London since Sadiq Khan has been in charge. There are you'll go to prison for 30 years in Iran if you remove a headscarf and you're female. So why not, instead of complaining about 350-year-old statues, why not turn all this activism and energy onto actually ending slavery around the world? Because it's happening now. People are suffering today in places like in the Middle East and elsewhere that we could do something about, rather than some statue from 300 of a guy that died 350 years ago. So the whole thing isn't anything to do with the slave trade, in my opinion. It's a kind of leftist power grab and a spitefulness. It's the same people who said, I hope Britain completely and utterly fails to prove Brexiteers wrong. It's that mindset.
Same people.
It's that mindset.
It absolutely is, Ed. As you say, they couldn't stop Brexit. They couldn't stop us electing a Conservative government back in December. They've failed all the way through. But unfortunately, I think the problem is that because this is the governmental issue, because government, and Boris in particular, has failed to step up and face them down, they now think that it's almost like they're running the country, they're setting the agenda, and the government's not. And I have to say, Priti Patel, I'm so disappointed.
Yeah.
She seems to be all hot air. And yes, she made a good speech in the Commons yesterday, but, you know, judge people by their actions, not their words, which is, I think, really important. And once you do that, you see that I think this Conservative government is failing us cataclysmically at this point in time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think Boris has been remarkably quiet over this, and he's looking weak. I mean, I've got to say, he's looking extremely weak at the moment. And I don't know. I can only hope that something pretty decisive is coming out. My worry and suspicion is that decisive action will come on Saturday, when more patriotic people are intending to go and protect these monuments on Saturday. So whether the action will suddenly be turned on people that are outraged by this, that will only inflame the situation further, and absolutely isn't the right thing to do, in my opinion. It's it's, you know, it's crime, it's vandalism, it's crime, it's against the law, and yet we've got police chiefs on TV wearing their rainbow lanyard saying that they were happy to go along with it. And just to give you an example of how people actually feel, and this disconnect between the politicians and general, normal, everyday people. Sky ran a poll on the banning of the film Gone with the Wind. 93% people said, no, don't ban it. 93%. And, you know, how out of touch can these people be with
But as you say, I mean, well, the answer is they're incredibly out of touch with the rest of us, but they also hate pretty much everything about our society. So I mean, as regards Black Lives Matter, because I see quite a few comments up about Black Lives Matter, and people are asking, you know, where do they get their funding from? Well, I'll tell you where in the States they get their funding from. Predominantly two organizations: Open Society, and guess who owns Open Society? Ed,
Soros.
Over to you.
Soros.
Yep. And the other organization that's a big multi-million-pound funder of Black Lives Matter from 2016, the Ford Foundation, the fifth largest charitable institute in the United States, who have got money to burn, in this case, actually literally, given what the rioters have done. So Black Lives Matters is essentially all about it. To me, it's a Marxist, feminist cabal, all about shaking money down. As somebody said here, sorry, I just missed your comment here. You know, if Black Lives Matter really cared about Black lives, look at the number of Black lives that are lost every weekend in Chicago, for example. I mean, do those Black lives not matter? What about the captain in the U.S. police, Captain David Doran? He lost his life to the mob. Did that? I mean, and this is what enrages me. You know, we see Black lives being lost at the hands of these protesters, and that's why they're thugs, and that's why, in my view, they don't give a damn about Black lives in mattering very much. Your thoughts?
No, I agree. I don't actually think it's a skin color related. This whole thing is skin color related. I mean, Wikipedia was updated within minutes of people starting to talk about the Marxist foundations of Black Lives Matter, and I forget the lady's name who founded it, and immediately, because a left-owned Wikipedia was all rewritten, and you know, there are some really strong voices out there from the Black community who are saying, whoa, these are dangerous individuals, they aren't what they appear, but they are not being given airtime. You know, we saw Candace Owens' speech, 70 million views in 24 hours or whatever it was. But that doesn't see the light of day on the media. So this is, again, it's a narrative. It's all about, this is about getting at the government. It's a leftist-driven agenda, and the Black lives are probably somewhere right at the bottom of the pile of priorities for these people. They really are. But yeah, I think people generally aren't stupid. And my observations over the last couple of days from talking to people who aren't political like us, in that they take a great interest in this, they are seeing this actually. And this is why I think the public is overwhelmingly pushing back against. You look at it in all the polls and all the information. And I'll just tell you an amusing story again on my local news tonight about a poll. So they in Liverpool, the students have whipped up a furore and wanted the halls at the university to be renamed. They were called Gladstone Halls after William Gladstone, the actual quite liberal prime minister. But, you know, there's some tenuous, they've managed to find some tenuous link to the slave trade and all the rest of it, which he absolutely renounced, actually, by the way, when he died. He regretted his actions and did a lot of really good things. But hey, you know, it's not about that, is it? So anyway, this student was on who was not of these shores, shall we say. And within 24 hours, they've got the way and they are being renamed. So the BBC gleefully reported all this. And then, and this is, I'm not exaggerating, anyone who lives in the Northwest will see this, solemnly looked at the camera and said, but we do have to just report to you that according to our Facebook poll, the vast majority of people disagree with the renaming of the halls. And it was delivered like a funeral. Honestly, it was unbelievable. So again, we're seeing a BBC, we're seeing this whole agenda pushed in the face of what the public want, and a tiny vocal activist minority at the moment are getting their own way, and that is, that's outrageous.
I see Natasha here, I don't know if you can see it on the screen, Ed, has come up with, she says, I see the BBC have just banned Tom and Jerry from appearing. Apparently there's racist connotations due to the big black mama appearing to be home help. I'm not sure if that's right or not, Natasha, so, but I'll tell you what, it wouldn't surprise me. You know, nothing about because the BBC are so woke on this issue. They're so woke on this issue that everything and anything is now about how black people are discriminated against. But here's the thought, Ed, that also I think blows apart their narrative about, you know, the racism in the UK. How come people from East Asia, how come, for example, Chinese people living here, how come people from India living here, how come these, and they have ethnic origins, how come they seem to do so well and perform so well, in fact, overachieve? Why is that? You know, how come it's just the black community that seems to suffer this very particular form of racism? So we're only racist against blacks, but nobody else? Is that what we're being asked to believe?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be completely honest here. I have not seen racism against the black community as an issue for probably 20 years in this country. I genuinely have not seen it at all anywhere. Now, you know, I used to go to football in the 80s and going into the 90s, and it was a problem, but it's been eradicated and it has gone. It really has. So what we're seeing now is actually, it's gone. So let's keep ramming it down your throat. And actually, I think all this is doing is stirring up the issues. I think it's just now making people that don't have an issue with it starting to get annoyed and frustrated, and is more likely to increase. So, yeah.
I'm just laughing at Angela's comment here. How can we be racist when, according to the adverts, we're all married to a black? Actually, Angela, you're spot on. I mean, but I think that's part of the narrative as well. You know, where we get kind of cudgeled into thinking that basically every white woman is a black man. I mean, and that's wokey advertising agencies, isn't it, Ed? I mean, that we know, but that's wrong as well. I mean, you know, like at the end of the day, this country is still 84% white. You wouldn't know that from the BBC. And you know, and what's the problem with that? Why should the 84% have to take a knee to
Well, there's an over-representation of the minority. It's true. But back to your question on the Indian community, the Chinese community, and so I guess what there is an absolute resistance to discuss are some of the factors that clearly have an impact. So, and there are various stats on this, and it's anything between 60 and 73% I've seen of black lads are fatherless. So that has an impact, you know, in the school setting and in the rest of it. And you know, these are all factors that have to sort of go into the mix of why, you know, there's this underachievement, whatever. But the reality is, particularly the Chinese and the Indian communities actually achieve better than the white community now in schools. I mean, that's what the stats are telling us. So the whole thing doesn't logically stack up, does it? Because it's not the white are getting a massive advantage over it. You know, it's nonsense, because actually we're performing poorer now than other ethnic groups on average. So there is no honest discussion on any of this stuff. You know, there are, you know, be it overrepresentation in crime, whatever it is, you know, statistics don't lie at the end of the day. And this is why people get angry, because however angry you can get, at the end of the day, when you've calmed down, the statistics and the truth are still there. And that's, you know, what's the saying? The closer to the target, the more flack you receive. But it's right.
Tell me about that. Yeah, but you're right. And this is, you see, Ed, this is something that when I talked to Rebecca Butler on Monday night, we did cover the fact that, you know, there are issues that do affect the black community, particularly here in the UK. And one of those issues is, for example, the fact that so many young black boys growing up are in households where there's just a single mom and there's no father figure. And that means that, as we see in London, I mean, there's no father figure to guide them, for them to look up to, for a role model. There's nothing. So what do they do, Ed? They fall into the way of, you know, they get involved in gangs.
Culture.
Gang culture, not dad culture, gang culture. And I'd like to see honest conversations to see how can we help to deal with that. How do we encourage, for example, you know, black dads to stick with the mothers of their children? These are things that we should talk about, not what happened in the 17th century on a slave ship, because the things of today can affect the future. Going back to what happened hundreds of years don't. So again, I think that so much talk about Black lives and actually very little substance, because it's so much of it by the media and by the activists. It's just grievance mongery, isn't it? Absolute grievance mongery.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you ban Gone with the Wind, but then the gang culture. I hear some of the lyrics of the music, you know, and the lack of respect for women, for police, and you know, this is drummed in, and you know, these are all issues that you know, you seemingly can't talk about, but they are negative. All this stuff is has a negative impact, and but it's easy, isn't it? Blame someone else rather than look inward. You know, the saying is, you point the finger, there are three pointing back at you, and it's right. You know, there are serious issues that need to be addressed in the community, and that sort of crime is one of them. I mean, the America thing, I think that the overwhelming stat for me was statistically, you're more likely as a black man in America, you're more likely to die at the hands of another black man than you are in police custody. And so actually getting taken into police custody is actually safer as a black man than living in the community. And that, you know, that's a mind-blowing thing to think, isn't it? But
it's horrific. But then how do you think it's going to work? Black Lives Matter have a couple of key objectives, one of which is defund the police. They want to essentially abolish policing in the States as we understand it. And indeed, Minneapolis is going with that, which would be interesting to see how that works out when an armed gang rocks up outside your door, you know, with a Kalashnikov in one hand and a Molotov cocktail in the other. Who are you going to call, Ed? It's not going to be Ghostbusters, is it?
But of course, the community with the highest rate of crime is going to want to defund the police. You know, is this not obvious to everybody? You know,
no,
if your community has a lot more criminal activity, then of course the last thing they want knocking around is the police. So yeah, I mean, it's bizarre that this stuff is given credibility and not just pulled apart for the nonsense it is. But hey, that's the left. I mean, there's this Trump derangement syndrome, Boris derangement, whatever it is, that people are going along with utter insanity at the moment.
Well, I mean, I wonder what you thought. You thought we're going to bring on another guest in a minute. So if you're listening, Jed, just bear with me a second. Just wanted to complete this line of thought. I wondered, Ed, what you thought of. Did you see the scenes outside Westminster with Labour MPs taking a knee and giving something that looked very much like a Black Power salute? Did you see though that? What was your thoughts on that?
I did. Yeah. So I've never seen anything like that for any British person that's died, you know, be it in our military or anywhere else that's been killed. No. So, you know, again, we said this last week. Nobody believes the guy deserved to die in the manner that he died.
No,
exactly, absolutely not. Yep. However, this was a serial criminal, an armed robber, a thug. A porn star as well, apparently, which was a new one on me. But you know, at the end of the day, not a savoury character, not the sort of life we should be celebrating or turning into a saint in this manner. And you know, at the end of the day, this was an incident in a foreign country that has nothing to do with Britain. So the sight of Labour MPs on the knees was just something else. But then Richard Bergen today said he would love to see a statue of Yasser Arafat erected in Leeds. So, you know, this is Labour, you know.
Yeah, you know the way we talk about our clown of the week. I mean, the reality is that Richard Bergen is always a clown of the week. But let me just see if I can add into the conversation here. One of our regulars who comes on, and if you can hear me, Jed, just let me know.
Yeah, I can hear you. Good evening, David. Good evening, Ed. And good evening, everybody watching and listening.
Hi, Jed.
So, Jed, before we go any further, to everyone else who's watching and listening, if you would like to come on and chat with us some evening, you're all very welcome. We can only probably bring on maybe one or two a night, but this is as much your forum as it is mine or Ed's. So, just want you to know that you're all part of this. Okay, Jed. So you've got the spotlight is on you, Jed. So don't worry about it, though. No pressure. So tell me, you've heard what Ed and myself have had to say about events in the last number of days. So what do you make of it all?
I just find it absolutely bizarre that we're sat here discussing what I see as the destruction of our culture. Because if you take away somebody's culture, you take away everything. And therefore, if you take away everything, then what is left? There is nothing left. We are built on our culture. We are who we are because of our past. And without our past, we are nobody. Because we cannot go to our future without understanding our past. And they say, oh, well, bringing the statues down is understanding our past. No, it's not. It's eradicating the past. You know, I read today, David, I'm sorry, just to harp on a little bit. I'm just reading an headline here that the founder of London's famous Guy's and Thomas Hospital, that statue could be removed because of slavery. They will not stop at a statue to a slave owner at a dock or in the town centre. They will not stop. And Ed was absolutely spot on. Where does it end? It ends with people. You don't support our cause, so we'll go after you. We will destroy you. We will imprison you. That's what it will end up with if we continue along these lines.
So Ed, sorry, Ed, go ahead.
I was going to just say you're dead right there. This is about attacking the people that don't conform. So if you saw all the people at Oxford taking a knee, and Peter Hitchens, I know you've had a few run-ins with David, but he didn't take a knee. So of course the mob turns on him because he's not taking a knee. And you know, we've seen somebody said all lives matter and the mob turned on them. So this is about vindictiveness and getting at the people that don't comply and conform. And this is, you know, let's be honest, left-wing ideologies across the world end up with concentration camps, re-education camps, death and destruction, gulags, because, you know, people conform to this group thing or this authoritarian thing, or you are punished and you are re-educated, and if you still don't, you're dead. And this is a left-wing this is left-wing mentality that's played out through history time and time again.
But this is all.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say this is also why we see large business conforming, because large business do not want their properties smashed, looted, set on fire by the mob, because they either haven't supported it or they don't support it. Because you notice Yorkshire Tea deliberately came out in support to say, hey, we're on your side. Yeah. Before any mob came knocking at their door asking the question.
Yeah, they did. Although actually, Jed and Ed, I don't know if you, just on that point you make, Jed, I remember about a week ago when the first riots were kicking off in Minneapolis and whatnot, I remember seeing one of the shopping malls, the mob were looting a Louis Vuitton store. So they were going in to get all the good quality Louis Vuitton stuff. And then about within a very short period of time, maybe 24 hours, one of the fashion directors of Louis Vuitton was tweeting out his support for the protesters who were looting the Louis Vuitton store. And honestly, if ever you doubted my assertion that liberalism is mental illness, that's, I present Exhibit 1, Louis Vuitton employee, senior employee, celebrating the people who are looting Louis Vuitton stores. Work that one out.
You never loot the library, do they?
It's absolutely bizarre when a company can tweet out, if you don't support Black Lives Matter, don't buy our tea. Well, that's 85, 90, maybe 95% of the population you're telling don't buy your tea.
Yeah.
How can that be right in the United Kingdom today?
Well, it shows the power. It shows the power, Jed, that this narrative has over corporations. I mean, the other thing is that I'm sick of watching all these virtue signaling corporations telling us that that they are supporting Black Lives Matter. But never mind that. In Parliament, the mother of parliaments yesterday, they observed 1 minute silence for a serial criminal. Now, whenever Lee Rigby was slaughtered on the streets of London, I can't remember, maybe either if you can remind me, was there a minute's silence for Lee Rigby in Parliament?
No.
Can't remember. And bearing in mind, he's from my old regiment, and I think I would have remembered that.
Yeah, there was nothing. There was absolutely nothing, Jed. And this is, I'm sure, Jed, as someone who has served our country in uniform, as I know you have, what do you make of the fact that the mob were able to deface Churchill? They were able to chase the plinth of the statue. They were able to chase, the police up and down around Parliament. What did you think of that? Well, what would you have liked to have seen done when they were doing that?
Well, firstly, to see the police in retreat was absolutely disgusting. That proves we have lost. This fight currently we have lost. We've lost the initiative. We've lost the high ground, as a squaddy would say. We've lost the high ground, and we're now in retreat. And the police showed that at the weekend in London. But then to see. And I did tweet out over the weekend when I saw Churchill's statue vandalised, how disgusted I was. And the anti-fascists were calling him a racist and a fascist, yet he is the single man that stopped fascism across Europe 76-ish years ago, thereabouts. And I just found it absolutely disgusting. And then 10 minutes later, we see somebody trying to set fire to the flag at the Cenotaph, and the police trying to beg him to come down. Well, personally, I would have ripped him down and made sure he hit the floor very hard.
Yeah, now, of course, we've also seen the guy that graffitied on Churchill, not tracked down by the police, but tracked down by the BBC for an interview.
Yeah, absolutely. No, there were some guys there around Churchill's statue, and I listened to a YouTube video from We've Got a Problem, and he interviewed the leader of the group of lads that were around the Churchill statue to defend it. They're on Facebook as Veterans v Vandalism. And all they did was they spent most of the day explaining to people why they were there, why they were protecting it, and there was no trouble. However, the police came along and did ask them to move along. The second they did, it was then vandalized.
Yep. Yeah, I thought that was, but did no one in policing authority recognise that that was inevitably what would happen? But actually, as I think somebody pointed out, it's not just the Churchill plinth that was defaced, because they actually, I mean, Gandhi's a racist as well. There's another statue I recall in Parliament Square there to one of the suffragettes or whatever, and I noticed they were putting stuff up around that as well. So these people, like, let's call them out for what they are. They're scum. They are feral. They are acting in a lawless manner with no regard to COVID laws, because, hey, this is another point. So for the last 3 months, folks, we've all been told to stay at home, protect the NHS, don't go outdoors. And all of a sudden, there's tens of thousands of feral leftists rampaging through our cities, and that's okay. I mean, what does that say about consistency of government?
I agree with you, David. And then we get a Labour MP saying if there's a spike in COVID infections, then don't blame it on the protests. Yet that is fundamentally why there would be a rise in infection rates.
No, Jed, you're totally wrong there. It would totally be down to Dominic Cummings taking a car drive up to the northeast.
Well, I thought you were going to blame Trump there, actually, Ed. Yeah,
well, he probably told Cummings to do it, didn't he?
Yeah, but doesn't this also, gentlemen, also demonstrate the hypocrisy of the media? They absolutely, the BBC and the rest of them, hounded Dominic Cummings because he took a 450-mile trip to take care of his 4-year-old son. Right, so Cummings, they wanted his head in the plate because he broke the COVID rules. Then all this mob breaks him, and the BBC are patting him on the back. How brave, how noble, how courageous! Isn't that just rampant, sickening hypocrisy?
Well, it is, David. Of course it is, because the left don't have moral values or principles. Their philosophy is not built on principle. It's built on emotion.
Yeah, there's no consistency of morality, principle, or logic either. It can change on a sixpence based on the circumstances. An argue one day can be flipped completely on its head the next day, which is why you just can't win, with that kind of mindset, because there's nothing to argue against, which is why they don't actually debate, and why they just attack. They play the man, not the ball, as you say, because they can't argue from any standpoint of consistency, because there isn't any. So
no, because there is no principle and there's no moral base to what they're arguing for. Yeah, absolutely. So that's why when we come with facts, black on black crime, etc., they then just immediately shout racist back at you, because they know they've lost the argument. So if I can point you to be a racist and get everybody else to say, then you'll back away because you don't want to be called a racist. Or you can call me a racist all day long. I will still state facts.
Yeah. I think we can't also underestimate just how toxic the media is in all this, because I know we talk about them a lot on, with alt news media, but, let's not forget that not too long ago, for me, it's a selective leaving out of information. So not too long ago, the greatest leader of all time was Winston Churchill. The British public voted for it, and that was that. And of course, we need to have the debate about, should we have the statue of Churchill? Well, no, we shouldn't, because the public voted overwhelmingly that they think Churchill is a great historical figure. So let's not forget the media role. The guy in Bristol, Colston, Bristol voted, the majority voted to keep the statue. I think it was 3 or 4 years ago. That's democracy. They voted to keep it. The mob comes and throws it in the river. Well, I'm sorry, the media need to be attacking the mob, attacking what that message says, that actually, to hell with democracy. We will just do what we want anyway. We can't win by voting. So mob rules. And I think the point you make about fear is a valid one. And we say this about Islam. It's an it's an underlying threat of violence and trouble if you don't go along with it. It's the same with you draw Muhammad and this will happen to you. It's the same with if you don't accept our narrative of the world, there'll be trouble, there'll be violence. But hey, we're the victims, and we're going to call you the fascists. You're the violent thugs. You're going to take to the streets. when we never do. And it's right out of that playbook, isn't it, of that Orwellian playbook.
Yeah, you're right. As you said earlier, Ed, sorry, David.
Yeah.
As you said earlier, if you point the finger, there's half a dozen pointing back at you, and they point the finger at everybody else, and will not accept the finger being pointed back at them.
Yeah, I'm just laughing at a comment here from my good Twitter friend, the only guru, who says little Greta will be furious if she sees a statue polluting the river. Absolutely. I mean, but the thing is, I mean, so okay, so we are where we are, gentlemen. Let's move it on a bit. So what do you think should happen next, and what do you think will happen next?
Okay.
Ed?
Yeah, I'll go with that. So I think what should happen next is government should say that every statue removed is going to be restored, and then will be debated properly. So anything that's happened to this point will be put right and put back to its original state. You have to send the message that we can't allow mob rule to win or to get its way. And as I said before, it's not about the people. I don't have any particular leanings for Colston or any of these people at all, but they are history. Just as Roman statues, who enslaved. It doesn't keep me awake at night, the fact this statue's there. So I think the message has to be everything's put back to how it was, and that needs to be done quickly. And then there needs to be, to stop this in its tracks, some serious penalty for anybody. Any criminal damage on any public or grade 2 listed or any of these buildings or monuments, they've got to feel the weight of the law, and that's it.
Jed, what's your view?
Well, I do agree with Ed, but I do think before we can put things back as they were, we have to restore law and order. Law and order is what controls society and keeps them in check. And it sounds wrong to say keep them in check, but society must be kept in check so we all follow the same rules and understand what those rules are and the consequences of breaking those rules. So first of all, we need to restore law and order before we can move forward. We can move forward and discuss statues, of course we can, but we can't move forward until we restore law and order.
And I think actually for me, that's been the single biggest failure of all. It has been that failure from Boris Johnson and his so-called Conservative government to actually enforce the rule. I passionately believe in the rule of law, but that rule of law has been abandoned. It felt to me, guys, like the streets of London in particular were abandoned for a couple of days. And Bristol, the rule of law was abandoned. And actually, the chief constable was quite proud about it. So, don't you think that there's a rot? Yeah. There's a rot that's sunk right. I mean, it's been there a long time, guys. This has just brought it out.
It's 30 years in the making in academia and in the police force. Yeah. I mean, I'll just play this scenario back to you, and how would this play out? So these people are saying that our feelings mean that these things offend us and they make us angry, and we're going to rip them down, and they've got the blessing to do it. So let's imagine another scenario. The girls in Rotherham say we cannot stand to walk past these mosques or whatever anymore, and we're going to graffiti them and rip them down because Muhammad teaches about slaves and sex slaves, and we've suffered this. And now for me that would be a far more genuine concern, because that's here and now. It's happening to people. Nobody alive today has been a slave, not in the slave trade we're talking about. No. However, so this is why it's wrong. It's subjective, because why the opinion of one group given a pass? But you can bet your bottom dollar if that group said we can't live with these mosques and places on our doorstep after what we've been through, it would be a completely different reaction from the media, from the police, and from everybody else. So the law is the law. You cannot take the law into your own hands. It's as simple as that. There's process.
But that's exactly what we've seen happen. We've seen the law being taken into the hands of the mob, and we've seen, and in my opinion, a supine response from the Prime Minister. Jed, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I fully agree with both your comments. And the second part of your question was, what's the future? Well, I think we can see what the future is if we look over to Seattle at the moment. where they have taken over a place called The Hill, the police station. The police walked out. They've taken the building over. We now have a free zone within the city centre of Seattle. So then that becomes mob rule, mob justice. Yep. And if law and order isn't restored, the rules that we all live by are not restored, that's where we'll end up. We'll have pockets, particularly, I would say, in university cities, where these pockets become what they would term a free zone, where the law applies. And if you don't meet up to the law, then the justice will be dealt out by them. And we can't get to that stage.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, Jed, well, listen, thanks very much for being part of the stream. We're just going to move on a wee bit, but thank you again for your contribution. Hope you all enjoyed listening to Jed. He's a great supporter of Alt News Media and Ed and myself. And Jed, very much appreciate you joining us and hope to see you back on the stream again in the very near future. Bye for now, Jed.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, David and Ed. Bye, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye. And that, folks, is how you do it. So if anyone on the stream fancies coming on and having a chat, that's, I think, very much what I want to see at the heart of my live stream. It's not me just ranting for an hour. It's about having an intelligent conversation. And thanks again, Jed, for those great points. So, Ed, we are where we are in this scenario. Amidst all of this furore that's been going on about the so-called Black Lives Matter, that COVID seems to have, it's kind of gone missing in action, hasn't it?
Yeah. It's funny how the media can switch on a sixpence like that, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, the figures, undoubtedly it's coming down, isn't it? And it's harder to see a justification for not returning life to normal, though obviously the schools news today was it seems crazy. It seems absolutely crazy that we are not going back to normal life. We should all be planning our summer holidays, and in my view,
well, I mean, for me, one of the great silent things that's happening is an economic collapse, the likes of which this country has not seen. And I'm sure you may have seen in some of the news today the fact that there's been quite a pile of redundancies announced by various like restaurant chains and whatnot. Yeah. And there's going to be so much more to come. And we've seen that apparently the UK has been singled out for potentially the world economy is going to contract by 10% this year. The UK is going to contract by 17%. Now, I take all these figures by experts with a pinch of salt, but nonetheless, I've argued against the lockdown pretty much all the way throughout. I think it's catastrophic for our economy. It's catastrophic for all those cancer patients and cardiac patients and others, elderly people that have been forced into loneliness for months and months on end. And there's going to be a terrible price. And the same media that is even today was badgering Boris about. But why did you? I'm thinking of Beth Rigby, the awful Beth Rigby of Sky. Why did you not lock down a bit sooner? Oh, right, Beth. So you'd like to have seen the economy destroyed even faster. And once all these redundancies hit us in the autumn, the media will turn on Boris Johnson and they will crucify Boris Johnson because they will say you created this, even though they've willed him on. So how do you think this is going to play out over the next couple of months on the whole coronavirus?
I think you're right, and I think it's predominantly the left again here. The teacher unions, for example, are loving this. They're saying this is destroying Britain, and it's scorched earth policy, isn't it? So the longer they can keep this going, the better. I mean, I think it was Alison Pearson tweeted, and so I can't verify this, so I'll have to check. This was literally just before we came on, that the death figures up to the end of May overall are under the 5-year average. From the start of the year to the end of May, the overall death figures for the country are less than the 5-year average. So, if that's the case, this is unprecedented, and overreaction doesn't even come close to describing what's happening at the moment. And for me, the other worry is this, what is it, 7 weeks to form a habit or whatever? How long will it take for people to actually go back to normal? So they just go to the football, go for meals, and just act normally mingle normally, or is there going to be this? Oh, don't get too close to me. And I think this is potentially going to have a long-term, long-lasting impact psychologically on people. And
I mean, one of the things that concerns me, if there's anything worse than coronavirus, it's social distancing. And we've got this 2-meter rule here in the UK. I was talking to a colleague of mine in a different European country today, and he was telling me that in that particular country, they have opened things back up again. So the pubs and restaurants are reopening. But get this, because especially a pub, in a pub, you still have to maintain, I think it's 1.5 or 2 meters in the particular country concerned. And if you so that all sounds fine in theory. Some civil servant thinks that's a great plan, but the reality is, in pubs, people drink alcohol. People drink alcohol, they become a lot more relaxed. And and all of a sudden, they're not bothered about 2 meters or 1.5 meters or anything else. So, but what's happening in the pubs there is that you get a €4,000 fine for any abrogation of social distancing, and the person who's found to have been the one who actually breached it gets a €400 fine. Yeah. You cannot run a pub and take a four grand fine in a night. That's your profits gone for probably several days. So so for me, Ed, I think that what this straitjacket of social distancing is going to kill us, going to kill more things than coronavirus ever killed.
Yeah. Well, already I think the stats on suicide are pretty horrendous, and they're saying undiagnosed conditions like cancer. So there's a tipping point, and I think we're well past that tipping point now. And for me, with what's happened with these left-wing activists over the last week or two, if there isn't a spike after this, where I don't know how many it was it 10,000, was it, in London last weekend? If there is no spike after that, well, what more evidence do we need that this, because I think the WHO have said now that there's no evidence that it spreads asymptomatically. So what more evidence would be needed to say, actually, we can start going back to normal? So for me, if there is no spike in 2 weeks, then there's no real credibility to continue in the current situation, in my view. Yeah. Well,
I mean, even here in Northern Ireland, Ed, we've had 3 consecutive days with 0 deaths. 0. And even and that's even using with the euphemism of, because death certificates are recorded as being with COVID if COVID is mentioned on the death certificate. So in actual fact, and this is the truth of the matter, people don't like it when I say this, but it's true. If George Floyd had died in Northern Ireland, right? Because he had coronavirus, he had tested for COVID-19. Even though he died in the horrible way that he did, because he had COVID-19 in his body, his death certificate would have put him down as a COVID-19 death. Yeah. I mean, that's how ludicrous it is. The situation has been so ludicrous, and I fear, Ed, that whilst I despise Labour and everything they stand for, this Conservative government is like, since it's got into power, it's shooting itself. Both barrels in both feet.
It seems to be terrified of the media, of opinion. The one thing we all admire about Trump is day one, he decided the media was his enemy and he wasn't going to attempt to bring them on board. I think Boris could probably do with the people he's trying to appease will never, ever, ever like him or give him a pass. That media mob and the left. So don't give in to, don't play their game. Just dismiss them. Whatever you do is never going to be good enough.
Yeah, but I think that's the fatal flaw in this government. They continually chase media headlines.
You do,
continually, and the media is not their friend. So ultimately, they're going to suffer big style because of that. And that's, I think, the only saving grace is that Labour's the opposition. But even Keir Starmer, when he's not on a bended knee to Black Lives Matter, he almost makes Boris look bad. So even though, admittedly, the rest of the Labour front bench is is something from a horror show, but nonetheless, this government really needs to waken up. Well, listen, folks, talking of wakening up and also going to sleep, we're pretty much approaching the end of our hour. So, Ed, first of all, can I give you my thanks for coming on the stream?
No, thank you, David.
Great to have you with us. Thank you, Jed, for coming on the stream as well. If there's anyone else who would like to be part of this, just drop me a message and we can have a chat about it and see when that might be a good thing to do. And the final thing I'd like you to do is, I do say this, but I'd appreciate it. If you do like the work that Ed and I do here on Alt News Media, then please consider, as it says at the bottom of the screen, going to altnewsmedia.net/donate and throw a few pounds in the bucket. It's what keeps us going. So if you can do that for us, I'd really appreciate that. I know Ed would as well. And I hope to see you here on Friday night. And I'm pleased to say that my special guest on Friday night is going to be none other than Anne-Marie Waters. It's been a few weeks since I've spoken to Anne-Marie. I'm sure we've got plenty to chat about, but I'm looking forward to seeing her then. So listen, thank you all for being here, part of the stream. Thanks again, Ed, and catch up with everybody Friday night, 8 p.m. Make it a date here. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.